Story 1. Barack Obama's Paranormal Encounter. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie within the walls of the White House? The power, the history, the decisions that change the world. It's almost too much for one place to hold. But some say it holds more than history. Some say it holds spirits. Barack Obama, known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind, often spent late nights in the White House. He was no stranger to long hours in the Situation Room, discussing matters of national security. For him, it was a place of focus, strategy, and unwavering attention. But one night, during his first term, the Situation Room became a place he'd never forget. Started on a quiet Thursday night. The air was unusually still, and the halls of the West Wing seemed eerily silent, save for the muffled hum of televisions monitoring global events. Obama had called a late-night meeting with his national security advisors to finalize plans for a covert operation overseas. As he reviewed documents and maps, he noticed something strange. There, seated at the back of the room, was a man in an old military-style uniform. His posture was stiff, and his face was pale, almost gray under the dim lighting. Obama glanced at the advisors around the table. No one seemed to notice the man. He tried to focus, brushing it off as fatigue, but every time he looked up, the man was still there, watching intently. His eyes weren't hostile. They were filled with sadness, almost like he was pleading for something. When the meeting ended, Obama lingered behind, pretending to review his notes. The man didn't move, didn't speak. Finally, with the room empty except for them, Obama took a deep breath and spoke. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady but low. The man slowly stood, his boots clinking softly against the tile floor. "You don't see me," he said, his voice soft but filled with weight. "But I've been here before. I've sat where you sit now." The words sent a chill down Obama's spine. He stepped closer, trying to get a better look, but the man raised a hand as if to stop him. "You're about to send good men into the dark," the figure said. "You think it's the right thing. So did I once." Obama felt his breath catch. He wanted to ask a dozen questions, but the air felt heavy, pressing against his chest. "Are you a soldier?" Obama asked, his voice quieter now. The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to the wall where a world map flickered on the monitor. "I knew the cost, but I didn't know the price." The next night, Obama couldn't shake the encounter. He had seen strange things before, moments of coincidence that he couldn't explain, but this felt different. He decided not to tell anyone. What would he even say? But the figure returned. Not in the Situation Room this time, but in the quiet of Obama's private study. It was late, and he was rereading intelligence briefings when he felt the temperature drop sharply. The air turned cold enough to make him shiver. He looked up, and there the man stood again, this time closer. His uniform was clearer now, Civil War era, Obama realized, with tattered sleeves and faded insignias. The sadness in his eyes was almost unbearable to look at. "You need to think carefully," the man said, his voice firmer this time. "Do you trust all the men around you?" Obama frowned. "I trust my team." "What are you trying to tell me?" The man stepped closer, his boots making no sound now. "Not every fight is worth the lives it costs," he said. "Not every war can be won." The next day, Obama met with his chief advisors again. As they spoke about the operation, every detail seemed heavier than usual. He glanced around the table, looking for signs, anything to connect the man's words to reality. When the room cleared, Obama stayed behind. He stared at the chair where the figure had first appeared, running through every possibility. Was it his conscience? A warning from somewhere beyond reason? Then, on the table, he noticed something that hadn't been there before. A faded photograph. It was small, black and white, and worn at the edges. It showed a group of soldiers, and at the center was the man in the uniform. Written at the bottom were the words, "Lincoln's Watchman, 1863. The name didn't mean anything to him, but the photo was unmistakable. It was him. Over the next few days, Obama couldn't bring himself to ignore the warnings. He called for a review of the operation, digging deeper into the intelligence. What he found shocked him, a critical flaw in their plans that could have led to unnecessary casualties. He called off the mission, redirecting resources to a safer alternative. The man didn't appear again after that night, but the experience left its mark. Obama often wondered who or what he had spoken to. Was it a ghost, a memory of the building itself, or something else entirely? One thing he knew for sure: in the White House, history isn't just remembered, it lingers. And sometimes it speaks. Real quick, if you're enjoying these stories, hit the subscribe and like button. It helps more people find these spooky tales and lets me know you want more. Alright, let's get back to it. Story 2. Joe Biden's Paranormal Encounter. The Whispering Halls of the West Wing. Have you ever heard the saying that old buildings hold memories? The White House is one of the oldest, most powerful places in America. And sometimes the memories it holds don't stay silent. President Joe Biden learned this the hard way during his first year in office. Joe Biden, known for his empathy and personal touch, was no stranger to the gravity of his position. But late at night, when the halls of the West Wing were empty, the silence could feel different. He often worked late, alone with his thoughts, reflecting on the weight of his decisions. That's when the whispers began. It started as faint murmurs, barely audible above the hum of the building. Biden was reviewing a policy proposal in his office when he thought he heard his name. Joe. The sound was soft, almost like the rustle of paper. He looked up, expecting an aide, but the room was empty. He shook it off as his imagination and returned to his work. But as the night stretched on, the whispers grew more persistent. Sometimes they were indistinct, like overlapping conversations. Other times they were clearer. Joe. Listen. The president stood, his chair creaking as he pushed it back. He checked the hallway outside his office. It was deserted, the faint glow of security lights casting long shadows. Hello, he called out, his voice echoing down the corridor. No answer. Over the next few nights, the whispers became more frequent. They always came late after midnight, when the West Wing was at its quietest. Biden started to notice patterns. The voices didn't just say his name. They spoke of decisions, regrets, unfinished business. One night, as he walked through the halls, he stopped at a small alcove where a portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt hung. The whispers seemed louder here, almost pleading. You can fix it. Don't let it happen again. Biden frowned, his heart heavy. Fix what? He murmured to no one in particular. Suddenly, the air around him grew colder. He turned, and there, standing in the dim light, was the faint outline of a man in a suit. His features were indistinct, almost blurred, but his presence was undeniable. The figure stared at Biden for a moment before disappearing into the wall. The experience left Biden rattled, but he didn't speak of it. As a man of deep faith, he believed in things beyond human understanding. But this felt personal. The whispers weren't just voices. They felt like memories, echoes of people who had walked these halls before him. The next night, Biden found himself drawn back to the alcove. This time, he brought an old leather-bound book he had found in the White House library, a record of past staff and aides who had served during FDR's presidency. Flipping through the pages, he found something chilling. One of the names listed had been circled in faded ink. Thomas Greaves, West Wing aide, 1943. That night, as the whispers returned, Biden called out, "Thomas? Is that you?" For the first time, the whispers stopped. The air grew deathly still. Then, a single voice answered, clear and mournful. "We tried, but it wasn't enough. Please, don't forget us." Determined to uncover the truth, Biden delved into the history of Thomas Greaves. He learned that Greaves had worked closely with FDR on wartime strategies, but had resigned under mysterious circumstances. Some records hinted at regret over decisions that had cost lives during the war. The connection weighed on Biden. He felt as though Greaves, and perhaps others, were reaching out, hoping their mistakes could be corrected through him. One night, as Biden prepared to leave the West Wing, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. Turning, he found himself face to face with the figure again. This time, the man's features were clearer. Haunted eyes, a weary expression, and a palpable sense of guilt. "Don't repeat what we did," the man said. History watches. The experience profoundly affected Biden. He began to prioritize decisions he might have otherwise delayed, focusing on policies that addressed systemic issues left unresolved by past administrations. He often found himself reflecting on Greaves' words. History watches. The whispers eventually faded, but Biden knew they hadn't truly left. The West Wing carried the weight of every decision made within its walls, and sometimes those decisions left marks that couldn't be erased. Years later, Biden would tell close confidants about the experience, framing it as a reminder of the responsibility every leader carries. The White House isn't just a house, he said. It's alive with all the triumphs and failures of those who came before us. And if you listen closely, you can still hear them. Which president's story do you find the scariest so far, Obama or Biden? Let me know in the comments below, and keep watching for Trump's terrifying encounter. Story 3. Donald Trump's paranormal encounter. The Lincoln bedroom apparition. The White House has stood as a symbol of power and history for centuries. It has witnessed wars, triumphs, scandals, and the lives of 46 presidents. But what if it has also witnessed something else? During his term, Donald Trump claimed to have experienced one of the most chilling moments in the White House's history, one that left him questioning what lurks within its walls. Donald Trump, known for his larger-than-life personality and flair for dramatics, wasn't someone easily shaken. He often spoke confidently about his time in office, but he rarely mentioned the strange night he spent in the Lincoln bedroom, a night that changed his view of the White House forever. It began as a simple decision. Trump had always been fascinated by Abraham Lincoln, often referring to him as one of America's greatest presidents. So, one evening on a whim, he decided to stay in the Lincoln bedroom, a room steeped in history and, according to whispers, haunted by its namesake. "It's just a room," Trump had said to his aides earlier that day. "A beautiful room. Historic. I'll be fine." He waved off their hesitant glances, clearly unconcerned. That night, the White House was quiet. The faint hum of air conditioning was the only sound as Trump settled into the four-poster bed, its ornate frame a relic of a bygone era. He admired the room's grandeur. The antique furniture, the large portrait of Lincoln on the wall, and the crimson curtains that framed the windows. Around midnight, Trump awoke suddenly. At first, he wasn't sure why. The room was still, bathed in the faint glow of moonlight streaming through the curtains. But something felt off. As he sat up, his eyes were drawn to the portrait of Lincoln. For a moment, it seemed as though the eyes in the painting were following him. He chuckled nervously. "Just my imagination," he muttered, lying back down. Then he heard it. A faint creaking, like someone walking across the wooden floor. He froze, his ears straining to catch the sound again. The creaking grew louder, deliberate, as if someone was pacing back and forth. "Who's there?" Trump called, his voice firm but uneasy. The room fell silent. Minutes passed, and Trump tried to convince himself it was nothing. But as he lay there, he felt the temperature in the room drop sharply. His breath formed small clouds in the frigid air. Then he saw it. At the foot of the bed stood a shadowy figure, tall and unmistakable. The man wore a black suit and a stovepipe hat, his face partially obscured by darkness. Trump's heart pounded as he sat up, his hands gripping the edges of the blanket. "Who are you?" Trump demanded, though he already knew the answer. The figure stepped closer, the sound of his boots echoing in the silence. His voice was deep and steady. "Do you know the cost of this house? Not the bricks, but the burdens it holds." Trump blinked, unsure how to respond. "This is the White House. It's the greatest house in the world." The figure tilted his head, a faint sadness in his expression. "Greatness is heavy," he said, "and sometimes it breaks those who carry it." The apparition moved to the window, gazing out at the Washington Monument. "I built unity," he said softly, "but even unity can fracture. Do not let division define you." Trump, rarely at a loss for words, could only stare. The figure turned back to him, his eyes piercing. "Decisions made here ripple across generations. Remember that when the weight feels unbearable, And just like that, the figure was gone. No sound, no movement, only the lingering chill in the air. The next morning, Trump was uncharacteristically quiet as he joined his aides for breakfast. When asked how his night in the Lincoln bedroom was, he simply said, "Interesting room. Very historic. But I think I'll stick to my own quarters." Privately, Trump couldn't shake the experience. He began to pay closer attention to his decisions, often mentioning how the weight of the presidency was unlike anything he'd imagined. In interviews years later, when asked if he believed in ghosts, Trump would smile and say, "I don't believe in ghosts, but let's just say the White House has a lot of history. You'd be surprised what it shows you." The Lincoln bedroom is just one of many places in the White House said to be haunted. Whether it was a restless spirit or a vivid dream, one thing is clear. The decisions made in the Oval Office aren't the only things that leave a mark. Sometimes, the past finds a way to remind us that it's still there, watching,